March 7th, 1945. Remagen, Germany. A cold wind cut across the Rhine as gray smoke drifted from the battered town. Sergeant Walter Eberhardt of the 9th Armored Division crouched behind a stone wall, his heart hammering. Through the haze he saw it, the Ludendorff Bridge still standing. No one could believe it. For months, Allied intelligence had reported that every major bridge over the Rhine, the natural barrier guarding Hitler's heartland, had been destroyed. The Germans were retreating east, blowing spans one after another to slow the inevitable advance. Yet here it was, a miracle of steel and rivets still spanning the muddy river. "Jesus, it's still up," Eberhardt muttered. Captain Karl Timmerman, the 23-year-old commander of Company A, 27th Armored Infantry Battalion, received the report and made a decision that would etch his name into military history. Without waiting for orders, he turned to his men. "We're taking that bridge." Artillery thundered from the western bank as the Americans sprinted forward, dodging sniper fire and mortar shells. German engineers on the far side frantically tried to detonate the charges wired to the bridge, but when the plunger was pressed, only part of the explosives went off. A muffled explosion tore a hole in the decking, but the span held. Smoke, shouts, the roar of tanks. By dusk, the Stars and Stripes flew above the Ludendorff Bridge, the first Allied crossing of the Rhine. Word spread like wildfire through both armies. To the Germans, it was unthinkable. The Rhine had been their final line, a natural fortress. Now it was breached. To the Americans, it was opportunity. But victory came with a curse. The bridge was damaged, unstable, and under constant bombardment. To hold Remagen, the Allies would need something else, a way to move an entire army across the Rhine before the bridge collapsed. That's when the engineers stepped in. March 10th, 1945. West bank of the Rhine near Remagen. Rain fell in cold sheets over the camp. The air reeked of wet canvas, diesel, and cordite. In a sea of mud, the men of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion stood in silence as Colonel David Pergrin unrolled a soggy map under the light of a flickering lantern. "Gentlemen," he said, pointing to the swirling line of the Rhine, "Command wants a bridge. Here. Fast." The room went still. The request sounded insane. The Ludendorff Bridge trembled under the strain of tanks and half-tracks. Each crossing shook its foundations further. If it fell, thousands of men trapped on the eastern bank would be cut off. Yet the Rhine was nearly half a mile wide here, swollen by spring melt and relentless rain. "Sir," one lieutenant finally asked, "how long do we have?" Pergrin looked up. 10 hours. A murmur rippled through the tent. 10 hours to build a floating bridge capable of carrying Sherman tanks and truck convoys under constant artillery fire across one of Europe's largest rivers. The colonel simply nodded. "Then we'd better start." As the men hauled pontoons to the riverbank, the rhythmic sound of hammers and chains mingled with the eerie whistle of distant shells. Spotlights cut through the night fog as cranes lowered steel treadways into the water. Every man knew that one direct hit could undo everything. Private Harold Benson, 19 years old, worked the ropes with trembling hands. "Feels like we're building a bridge to hell," he muttered. His buddy beside him grinned weakly. "Yeah, but we're gonna make the devil pay toll." On the opposite bank, German spotters watched through binoculars. One officer, Major Hans Kruger of the 11th Panzer Division, couldn't believe what he was seeing. "They're building another bridge?" he said, his voice cracking with disbelief. "In this weather?" He shook his head. "Americans have lost their minds." But madness or genius was exactly what it took. The engineers worked in waist-deep water, their boots sinking into the freezing mud. They hauled pontoon sections by hand, guiding them into place with ropes while mortars burst overhead. Floodlights flickered, shrapnel tore the night, and still they built. By midnight, the bridge had stretched halfway across the river. A shell struck nearby, drenching the men in spray and smoke. But the line held. They didn't stop. They couldn't. Every minute mattered. On the far bank, Patton's Third Army was waiting for its chance to surge east. The bridge at Remagen had opened the gate. Now the engineers had to make sure it stayed open. As dawn began to break, the last treadway clanged into position. The exhausted men stood soaked to the bone, their faces streaked with oil and ash. Colonel Pergrin checked his watch. 9 hours and 36 minutes. "Tell command," he said quietly. "We're across."
Company is taking heavy fire near the bridge. We need backup now. Do you copy? Ready. Pull on my count. 1, 2, pull. Keep it steady. Secure the perimeter. I repeat, secure the perimeter. Don't let anyone else through until further notice. Got the line. Oh! Push harder. Get it back to the dock now.
March 11th, 1945. East bank of the Rhine, Remagen sector. The first rumble came at dawn, a low, rolling growl that echoed through the mist. Major Hans Kruger stepped out of his command dugout, clutching his field glasses. Across the river, a line of olive-drab vehicles snaked toward the newly built pontoon bridge. At first, he thought it was just infantry supply trucks. Then he froze. The first Sherman tank rolled onto the floating roadway. Steady, deliberate, unstoppable. Then another, and another. Kruger whispered, "Unmöglich." Impossible. For days, the German command had poured artillery onto Remagen, convinced they could choke the bridgehead before the Allies crossed in force. They'd even launched V-2 rockets and Luftwaffe bombing raids, desperate to destroy the crossing. But now, before his eyes, the Americans had built another way across. A brand new bridge that stretched from bank to bank like it had grown there overnight. 10 hours, under fire. He lowered his binoculars. "They built it," he said quietly. "They actually built it." Behind him, the remnants of a once proud army staggered eastward, weary, broken, and out of ammunition. Every truck that sputtered away from the Rhine carried the same realization. Germany's last natural defense was gone. On the west bank, the engineers cheered as convoys began to pour across their creation. N3 half-tracks, GMC fuel trucks, and long columns of infantry moved with clockwork precision. The bridge bobbed gently under the weight, but it held. Colonel Pergrin watched with a rare smile. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said to one of his lieutenants. "Yes, sir," the officer replied. "Like watching history roll by." Nearby, a radio operator relayed the update to headquarters. "Rhine crossing secured, bridge operational. Estimated capacity 16,000 vehicles per day." The feat stunned not only the Germans but also the Allied High Command itself. Eisenhower's staff could hardly believe the report. A 1,000-foot floating bridge assembled under fire in less than 10 hours. It became a living symbol of American engineering and willpower. To the men who built it, it was simpler than that. It was survival. Private Benson, the 19-year-old who'd joked about building a bridge to hell, sat on a pontoon eating cold rations, watching the tanks thunder east. "Guess we made it," he said softly. His sergeant nodded, glancing at the bridge stretching across the Rhine like a promise. Yeah, but it's just the beginning. For Germany, it was the end. Within weeks, Allied divisions fanned out across the heartland, racing toward the Elbe. The war that had raged for 6 brutal years was collapsing from within. The Rhine, once the symbol of German strength, now carried the sound of Allied engines rolling toward victory. And for the men who built that bridge in 10 hours, it was proof that sometimes the impossible isn't luck or miracle. It's sweat, courage, and the will to finish what history demands.